All right, we'll call this meeting of the Policy Committee of the Whole to order this December 6, 2020. Before we get started, did want to mention that if anyone has public input, we do have these yellow forms in the back. If you would, just please fill those out, bring them to me, or if we get to an agenda item that you would like to offer public input on, please just make sure you get my attention so that I can recognize you at the appropriate time. We have three policy revisions that are on the agenda for consideration tonight. All of them, though, are pretty related to each other, and all of them.
What is
What?
racket?
What you think?
Static?
Huh?
If it's your microphone or if it's back there.
Is it my microphone, you think? How about, let's try that. Let's see if that makes it better. Can y'all still hear me? Is it still picking up? Okay. So anyway, all of them have to do with addressing duties and responsibilities of our employees that arose out of some complaints related to kind of an increase in non-instructional duty that began at the beginning of the school year. And so to help kind of introduce the issues and concerns related to these, Miss Dina has filled out some requests to give public input, and I'll just ask that she come up at this time and just kind of give us the history of what the concerns are and what the problems are that we're trying to address. And as she's coming up, though, Miss Cindy, if you would call the roll for us, please.
Okay. Ms. Richards? Mr. Toller?
Here.
Ms. Abrams?
Here.
Mr. Westmoreland?
Present.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Mr. Bush? Here. Mr. Moore? Ms. Simmons?
Here.
Ms. Dominguez?
Present.
All right. Ms. Dina, if you would, just kind of give us some background on what's going on and what the issues are that we're trying to address.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank y'all for letting me speak. I know y'all know me, but I'll say Dina Espinot's president of Tangipahoa Federation of Teachers. Okay, basically, the issue with duty goes back to COVID, okay? Prior to COVID, there were duty schedules, you had your duty days, you had basically 90 minutes of duty a week. You went home and everything was wonderful. Then boom, here comes COVID. And with COVID, the kids couldn't be in big groups. So the best way to handle it, and we all agree with that, was that the kids would go to their classroom instead of being in a large group out on the playground or wherever they would have been. So when COVID hit, school shut down, then the next school year, that's how we proceeded. So what happened was the students in the morning when they would get to school would go to their classroom. Well, that meant that all of the teachers and paras had to be there at 30 minutes before school started or more. Usually it was like 40 minutes before school started to be in the classroom for the kids to be there, which put 30 minutes more of duty on them in the morning and the same thing in the afternoon or more. Now, that was COVID. Everybody had to do their part. Everybody did their part. And that happened for 2 years. So when the summer came around, it's like, we're not having COVID issues anymore. We're not doing COVID measures. Then we assumed that things would go back to normal. Well, we polled our members, and some places had gone back to normal. And others were extremely bad. I mean, talking about anywhere from 5.5 to 6 hours of duty a week on top of working 7 hours a day. So that was just extremely too much because these schools kept their schedules the way they were, where the kids would come in the classroom. When they got to school, the teachers would be on duty, the paras would be there too. Because it's not just teachers that do duty. Paras do it too, and they do a lot of duty too. So we're not just talking about teachers, we're talking about the other employees too. So anyway, we started looking into it, and we got to the point where it was very excessive. So that's when we started having the conversations about what can we do to eliminate this, because you're wearing people out. It's not what's good for our employees. They can't go, you know, let me just tell you this, one other problem that the employees were having is because they had to be at school so early, they couldn't even get their own children to school where they needed to be, because they had to be at school, you know, extra early, and some of them were having trouble getting kids to daycare that hadn't opened yet. You know, they only open at a certain time, and they had to be at school by the time before daycare opened, so they had to make other arrangements to try to get their kids where they needed to be so they could go to work. So that's basically what started all this.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. Now, I'm going to call you back up when we talk about some specific things, but I did want to let Ms. Lisa or Mr. Ron come up and just kind of talk about what the administration's been doing to try to address these concerns when they were first brought to your attention, and then we can maybe kind of start talking about the specific approach. Proposals.
Yes, sir. On duty specifically, our supervisors have to approve our principal schedules. So Ms. Dina is really good about emailing me, letting me know something in particular. And when we get that, we send it to the supervisor who sits down with the principal to go over. And so there was a lot of schedule adjustments that had to be made after school started, which, you know, the supervisors work through the principal's own. And as we find out, or if there's something that hasn't been addressed and it comes up, I always let Ms. Jackson know, and then the supervisor works on it. So I know that there's a couple of schools, particularly that may change their schedule because of it, which we didn't like to do after the first 9 weeks started, but at the semester they'll be making some further adjustments at this one particular school.
Okay. And then, Ms. Lisa, one of the things I know y'all been working on, and it's related to this first proposed policy revision dealing with compensation and K-time. Is the administration ready to at least kind of talk about what y'all been looking into and kind of some of the challenges that we're running into as far as getting that done? Yes, sir.
One of the things that we've been paying attention to is teacher attendance. And if you talk to teachers, and I know most of us have a teacher in our house somewhere, when they have to make a doctor's appointment, for example, they either have to take off half a day or a whole day. And you can't get in, if you do duty or have whatever, you can't get into the doctor. So one of the things, and I know Mr. Gico, even when I was a principal, we talked about how to make this work, and it was a logistical thing, but because of COVID, we kind of did a pilot, and we're piloting it right now, where if a teacher's out for an hour, like another teacher may fill in for an hour and be paid for that hour of time. So if I have a doctor's appointment, rather than taking off half a day, I could take off an hour or 2 hours, because we would rather a certified teacher in front of our children for the other 6 hours of the day than them have to take a whole day for a morning appointment, just because that's what it took to get a sub. So right now, because of the sub shortage, we've had where our teachers can during their planning time, they can fill in for a teacher who's out, or a sub that wasn't wasn't able to be filled, and then we compensate them. And we've worked out the system where it's a green time sheet, the principal verifies that it occurred, it had to be during their planning time, they have to show that a sub was not available, and then we're able to cover that. So what we've been talking to other districts. There's another district who does something similar, but it's about how to do the time where, for example, if I did an extra hour of duty, maybe I did an athletic duty, how can that be used as comp time for that hour I missed, rather than docking me because I did blood work that morning before I came in? So it's not something easy just to put in to track 3,000 almost employees, but it's something that we started looking at. Part of it was, they are doing, like if I do athletic duty or extra duty, how can we compensate a teacher for that time? It's something that's meaningful to them, which is their time that they may have to take off. So we ran it through our teacher advisory committee, the last group, I think, was that last month we met? And we explained it to them, and then we asked for them to give us some feedback. And we only had a few that gave us feedback, but it was all positive around, I would like to not have to take off half a day or a whole day, because I'd rather be with my students, but I still have to do this. I would like to, if I am doing extra time, I would like that to be used. One of the teachers put a good comment in, and she said, look, we know there's going to be extra meetings, but can you set some limit where we know it may be 4 extra meetings, and then after that, what would the compensation be? So they gave us some other things to think about. In our next steps, number 1, we have a meeting with the Munis representative on Thursday, because that is our system that our time, our payroll runs through. And then also the new teacher advisory committee will come in January, a new teacher of the years, and we would have another group to get some feedback from as we continue to revise that. But I just have to say, I really appreciate Dina. She always lets us know, hey, this is what it is. She listens to what we're trying to fix, and then keeps us aware so that we can address it as expediently as we can with our supervisors and our principals.
So Lisa, my question, I appreciate all of that, and one question I have is on this policy GBAA, that was put on the agenda today, just thinking that the administration may have some revisions that y'all need to might want to make to that policy come January. Do you still anticipate that some possible revisions may be coming in January? Would you like for us to kind of move this forward so that we can adopt those possible revisions, or how would you like for us to proceed?
Yes, sir, we would really appreciate that, because we know, especially with all of our teachers are putting in and doing now, and like Dina said, we came out of COVID, but everybody was still adjusting. We want to really listen to one more group at least in person, and then get some more data around what would our teachers, what do they value? Some of them so far are valuing the time, extra duty being compensatory time for their absenteeism, not necessarily a check, but we also would like to make sure we have the system in place so that it is equitable and teachers have a way to check it on their own. There's a few things with Munis we're looking at that we don't currently use, like employee self-service, where they could see what's actually in the system on them and not just wait to come out and ask questions. So I think there's a little bit more work to do around it, Mr. Duncan.
Okay. So for the board or the committee then, what I'd ask for a motion on is just that we refer possible revisions to this policy to the full board meeting at our next meeting in January, and then between now and then, the administration will hopefully provide us some proposed specific revisions, but we'll at least be able to fully adopt those at our next board meeting.
A, B, and C?
Just A.
Just A.
Just A.
Motion.
So moved.
Motion is made then by Mr. Toller, seconded by Mrs. Sandra Bailey Simmons. Does the board have any questions on that motion? All right, if there's no questions, is there any public input on that motion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. Ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
The next item on the agenda, there is a specific proposed revision to at least kind of get the discussion started. Members should see that the specific revision there is that teachers shall be compensated at their daily rate of pay for any non-instructional duty that they are required to perform beyond 90 minutes per week. Again, possibly between now and when we do our final adoption in January, there might be some additional tweaks to the language that folks might want to propose, but the goal today is really just to kind of recognize that this is an issue and kind of get the discussion started on how we might specifically want to address it. And Ms. Dina, you had asked to speak specifically on this issue, and we'll give you that opportunity now and then kind of take some comments from the board.
The question that I had, the 90 minutes of duty, I think it says teachers, But like I said earlier, the paras also do duty. So I would ask for a change of either employees, or if you look at earlier in the, yeah, up there, as part of their work assignment, teachers as well as employees. So, yeah, the third paragraph, you could, right, other employees. So you could actually change teachers to they, and it flows with the rest of the beginning of the paragraph, because that's who they is, the teachers and the other employees. That way you don't leave out the paras who do a lot of duty.
And I'm not opposed to finding some language to make that work. The struggle I had in trying to word this without getting like overly complicated or having to add a whole nother page was with paras, a lot of what their normal responsibilities are might relate to non-instructional responsibilities. And so that sentence dealt with
Right.
non-instructional duty, which was specific to teachers. I mean, but I understand that.
But a lot of them are doing before school, after
Right.
school duty too. So they
So-
need to,
So yeah, trying to figure out how we can, so what we may end up needing to do is come up with a lot more language to accomplish what we're really trying to accomplish, and I recognize that, but, so yeah, we can try to think about that.
that's really all I had to say
Okay.
about that.
What about it?
Other than I
Oh,
told
go
you
ahead.
the story about how we came to this because of COVID.
Right.
And then when COVID left, that some places didn't change.
And I think you had told me in one of our conversations that the 90 minutes was kind of a traditional
Right, yeah.
mark per week for
I
teachers.
think that's what it used to be prior to COVID,
Okay,
from what I remember.
all right. Thank you, Ms. Dina.
Okay.
Unless you had anything else you wanted, I didn't mean to cut you off. Okay. Any other members of the board?
Well, I have to agree. I know I've had many phone calls from paras who work way more than what's required of them, and they make way less than a full certified teacher. And they're working a lot more. They're doing all the exact same things the teacher's doing. In some cases, I talked to Mr. Jinko about it. They're actually teaching classes for weeks on end with no extra additional money because they're not a certified teacher. But if they don't have anybody to fill in, then they end up having to put a para in the classroom and they have to teach every day. Teach, like as in full-on teach. So we have got to do something to help the paras in that situation as well. It can't be just about teachers doing extra duty. It has to be paras.
Well, and I also know that one of the other things I wanted to try to figure out a way to address was protecting, our collaboration time and our planning periods. And again, my goal today was just to move it forward, get the discussion going. I would love to hear from principals and other folks, within the administration on how we can come up with some language that accomplishes all of those things. But I wanted to just at least kind of get something before us so that we can have the conversation. But those are some other things that I know we also need to address.
Well, with her suggestion of changing teachers to they to match the rest of the paragraph, would that not be workable?
I don't think it does though, because again, paras do a lot of other things as part of their regular responsibilities that are not instructional related. So if you just say that paras can only do 90 minutes of non-instructional responsibilities before they receive extra compensation, then you're paying them for a lot. So I mean, we got to come up with something else. Maybe 90 minutes outside of the classroom, or so, I don't know what that language would be. Go ahead, Mr.
I think the duty part pretty much spells it out,
Yeah.
because when they're in a classroom working and doing whatever, that's not duty, that's their job.
Right. So maybe if we come up with a better definition of what duty means, then that gets us where we need to do. But one of those two things needs to happen. We need to either better define what we're talking about when we say duty, or we need to come up with a different provision that deals with paras. But I'm happy to find that language between now and when we do the final adoption in January, you know, as we kind of talk this stuff out. What I don't want to do is miss the opportunity to move this to the next step, so. But Ms. Sand?
Brett,
Yeah,
are
Mr.
we
Jerry.
referring to anything outside of the normal job description? Is that what you're referring to?
So for teachers,
Anything
well,
outside of the normal job description?
for teachers, when we're talking about duty, I know that those are, you know, like monitoring the hallways before and after school, monitoring the lunchroom, the dismissal after school, you know, all of those things. You know, those were responsibilities that in the past had been shared amongst the entire faculty and among other people. And for whatever reason, as Ms. Dina said, you know, it has gone from, okay, we're going to divvy all of this stuff up to where each of you have no more than 90 minutes to now, I know at Hammond High at one point we were up in the 200 minutes range, or even higher. And so we just need to get a handle on it, because again, it's great that we've, as a board and as an administration, we've raised pay, we've done so many things to try to make our teaching positions attractive so that we can compete for these teachers with our neighboring districts. But if we did all of those things and then turned around and made their job 3 times more difficult at the same time, well, we didn't really accomplish a whole lot, you know. So I think it's important that we take this serious. Ms. Sanders?
I was just gonna say, so at what point will we make a change?
Well, we're gonna move this to the next step, I think, hopefully tonight, if the rest of the board agrees that we're gonna move this towards final adoption. And then, yeah, between now and when we do our final adoption, if we can all put our hands together about better language that we will then offer up at the final board meeting, then hopefully we can do that.
So you need a motion to move it to the,
Yeah, we would need a motion to adopt the proposed revisions, which would then put it on the board agenda for final adoption in January. And then, yeah, between now and then, if we can come up with some better language, then we'll have that ready for that January.
and who will be working on that?
Well, I will continue, I'm certainly happy to continue working on it, but I would love to hear more feedback, you know, from anybody that's interested in providing it.
I'll make the motion.
All right. Motion is made by Mrs. Sandra Bailey Simmons
I'll second.
to adopt, seconded by Mrs. Dominguez. Is there any further discussion on the motion? All right. Any additional public input? All right. Hearing none, we'll ask members to vote your machines.
Brett, as soon as we get some additional language and stuff, maybe we can email it among the board
Yep.
for further input.
Absolutely.
At that time, then
Voting is
by the time we
open.
get here in January, we'll have something.
Yes. Yep.
Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
Brett, one
Yes, sir.
thing, if we get suggestions that seem logical enough to adopt as change, we're gonna bring that back before the committee before we bring it.
It's going to go to the board, but if you have some
To
that,
the board with that change?
yeah, but if you have some that you'd like for me to put into a proposed amendment between now and then, like I said, we can maybe email back and forth or text, or you can present it at the board meeting. Yes, sir. Yeah. Same approach with the final policy proposed revisions. You know, I put in some proposed language here, adjusting the time to show up and how long they have to stay afterwards, and then also putting in a provision that specifically says that teachers shall receive a minimum of a 30-minute duty-free lunch break each day, which I think is actually state law, but again, we're hearing reports from some of our teachers that they're being required to work lunch duty during what's supposed to be their actual lunch break. So I felt like this was a good thing to go ahead and specifically address and make it explicit in one of our policies. So Ms. Dean, do you have anything to add on where this one came from or why you think this is important? So this would change, right now the policy says that teachers are expected to show up 15 minutes before school. The proposal is to change that to 10 minutes before school starts, and the policy currently says they have to stay at least 15 minutes after the close of each school day. This would change it to 5 minutes.
Actually, it's about the little things. You say 15 minutes, and 15 minutes doesn't seem like a lot, but 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after, that's 30 minutes extra a day, 2.5 hours a week. That's outside of the time that they're paid for, to be there, just to be there. There's nothing, I mean, yeah, you get there, and I can assure you, as long as I ever taught, you're there way before 15 minutes, but you're on your own. You know, nobody has to tell you, you need to be here 15 minutes before school starts. You do it anyway, because you're there trying to get ready for the day. But when it's put in a language where you have to do this and you have to be here this long, you're imposing that on them. And so you're imposing 30 minutes of work a day that they're not getting paid for. And that totals up, you don't think it's anything, but then it totals up to 2.5 hours a week that has been taken away from them. That's their time. And you know, that it's just the little things you don't think about. You don't think, well, that's no big deal, but it really could be a big deal. And the time after kind of coincides with the doctor's visits and the dentist and the, you know, getting their kids to this appointment, that appointment, or even themselves. If they, you know, some of these schools don't get out till like 3:35. And if you make them stay another 15 minutes, then it's 3:45. They got to go get a kid. They got to take this kid from here to there to get to the doctor by a certain amount of time or get to an appointment. It doesn't leave them a lot of time because a lot of people close at 5, you know. So I know it's only 15 minutes, but it could make a difference in that respect to where you're trying to give them time to go do these appointments without taking off. So that came into, Mr. Duncan brought that to light too. That could be an issue there. So that's pretty much all I have to say
All
about
right, thank you, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a motion to adopt the proposed revision?
I'll make the motion.
Motion is made by Mrs. Bailey Simmons. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Janice. Any discussion from the board on the proposed revisions?
We're talking about the duty-free lunch, that did just pass in legislation, that they have to have that, but there again, it does put a, you know, question into somebody has to do duty during lunch. So if they have duty during lunch, they're still gonna have to be able to get a time. So how do you compensate on that, Mr. Jinko?
That's the wizardry in scheduling. You hope that, you know, that you can get a cafeteria monitor or someone to watch the kids while they're eating, while your teacher has some time to, you know, eat their lunch, drink their Diet Coke, whatever it happens to be, before they have to go out on duty.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I don't want
and
it
you have
to,
your administrators also.
right. And look, I don't want it to seem like I don't understand the challenges that our administrators are having to work through. I do, you know, and I appreciate that a lot of what, again, going to Hammond High, a lot of what the principal's trying to do there is to increase the safety and security on our campuses, and that is a very important objective. But not wearing out our teachers is also a very important
Exactly.
objective. So we've got to figure out what the
As Ms. Dina noted, before COVID, we had very few issues. When we get the rules, whatever the policy is going to be, we will work to do what we need to do to make sure that the policy is followed, that our teachers have the time that they need and that they deserve. So it will be done.
That's all we're asking.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Jinko. And any other questions from the board? All right.
How big a shortage are we having filling spots during the day now, as far as teachers or pairs or subs or?
Tremendous. Yes, sir.
And I think a lot of that stems from this, right? We got one person trying to watch 2 classes, doing 2 duty
Well,
spots.
as Dr. Bucells, we started, compensating our teachers because we could not find subs, so we had to have someone to watch fifth hour physical science.
Right.
And our teachers, stepped up as they have from day one, and they will continue to do. So we're still working with ESS to try to recruit more substitutes, trying to find teachers, custodians, bus drivers, et cetera.
But that's actually a challenge on top of this, right?
Correct.
I mean, that's
Yes.
that's another
That's a
layer,
separate-
that's
that's a
another
separate
layer
issue.
of exhaustion,
Yes.
in addition to these, yeah. Any other discussion from the board? All right, hearing none, we'll call the question, ask members to vote your machines.
Voting is open. Voting is closed. Motion passes unanimously.
All right, that's all of the items on the agenda for today. With that, we'll call this meeting adjourned.